since we haven't been doing this lately.
Well,
I guess we'll stream last night's Professor Black Truth since we yeah, you did tell me about it, but I fell asleep.
no, somebody was stuck this morning.
Oh, all right, I got it keyed up.
A lot of you don't appreciate having to see this, especially if you've just eaten dinner or breakfast for those of you who view these Sunday addresses in the morning. But I'm afraid I gotta make your stomachs a little bit queasy.
And so we can go on and on and on. And so for the people sitting at home who are saying, yeah, man, I'm gonna sit this one out. Okay, but let me tell you right now, go ahead and write it down. Roland Martin said at 7-Eleven on October 13, 2022, you ain't getting shit. If the Republicans take control of the House and the Senate.
All right, let's address first things first. As with every other instance like this, roly-poly doesn't get profane or start cursing at people, except for black people, specifically
that a lot
black
of you-
grassroots. Why, that seems to be the main thing that makes him get all profane and all vulgar. When he was buck dancing with Hillary Clinton, he didn't get profane with her. He didn't make any demands of her either, except for maybe a job in her administration. When he talked to, or rather got checked by, Richard Spencer, he didn't get profane with the preeminent white supremacist of our time either. No cursing at Richard Spencer, no foul language. He only gets like this with black people, especially when it's black people who are not going to vote for the Democrats. Then all of a sudden, roly-poly loses the one or two marbles that he pretends to have, and he starts cursing and ranting. That's because he has no respect for black people. As Roland Martin sees it, he's smarter than black folks. His job is to be the Negro wrangler. He's going to corral all these little Negroes for massa. So as he sees it, he can talk to us any way he wants. Who does he think is going to hear him cursing and condescending to them and then think, I need to listen to this guy? So that's the first thing. Never listen to anyone who doesn't respect you. And Rolly wears his disrespect for the black community like a badge of dishonor. But of course, as we all know, Rolly's real audience isn't black people at all. His real audience are the white Democrat Party leaders who he's hoping will throw him a few advertising dollars and consulting fees.
But let me tell you right now, go ahead and write it down. Roland Martin said at 7-Eleven on October 13, 2022, you ain't getting shit. If the Republicans take control of the House and the Senate.
He's on a job with them. He wants to show that he has as much contempt for the black grassroots as his white Democrat masters do. When Rolly says that the Dems need to do effective communication with the black community, this is what he's talking about. And when he says they need to go to black-owned media, I don't know if he's talking about himself. What he's really saying is, I'll get out there and I'll tell them they're a bunch of damn fools for not doing what you say, Master. See, I'll be the black face that you can go ahead and have your little white supremacist talking point spotted, but I'll talk to him because I know you can't talk to him like that, but I'll do it for you. See, give me some dollars and I'll talk to him. They need to curse at us, talk to us like dogs, and then say, now go and vote for us? Is that their voter outreach? If you wonder where crap like get your booty to the polls or no voting, no bucking come from, they get encouraged by bottom feeders like this. This is how the Democrats see black people, as if we're nothing more than animals who only follow our lowest instincts. So when you come to black folks, you don't talk about what we're going to get. All you have to do is put some strippers on a pole, and that's how you communicate with black people. The mentality of the white Democratic leadership is no different than the white right. As they see it, black men can't keep their pants on and black women can't keep their legs closed. So you don't have to come to black people and talk about policy. When talking to the black community, you can just go ahead and be foul and vulgar about it. Just say no voting, no bucking, because black people don't actually deserve to get anything for their vote. And if all else fails, send in the clowns, the discredited and illegitimate bootlicks like Rolly, who will cuss and rant and talk to us like dogs because black people are not to be respected.
Roland Martin said at 7-Eleven on October 13, 2022, you ain't getting if the Republicans take control of the House and the Senate.
Can you see Roly-Poly talking to the LGBT community like this? Ever seen him talk to the Jewish community like that, or Hispanics, or these women's groups who are white-led, by the way? Of course not. Do you see any of the Democratic operatives talking to these other groups like this? Of course not. Rolly would never do that. Forget about cursing. He wouldn't even be disrespectful to these other groups. So why does this punk think that he can talk to us like this? Remember, when Rowley says Democrats need to come to fools like him to talk to the black community, this is what he means. Democrats need to come to him so he can talk to us like this. Because it would sound a little bit different if Joe Biden and the other white Democratic leaders said what they thought about us. You know, like, if you can't decide whether or not to vote for me, you ain't black. I bet you will be like, Master, you need to let me deliver lines like that. They feel some kind of way when you do it. They'll accept it for me. See, I'll be the black face. You can hide behind the spike. Your talking points. This is Rowley's idea of black voter outrage. Yeah, he's reaching out all right so he can slap black people in the face. Now, putting Roly-Poly's potty mouth aside, he says Republicans aren't going to do anything for black people. But you notice that he never names even one thing that Democrats have done or are going to do for black people. It's a given that black folks aren't going to vote for the Republicans, but Rowley and his white Democratic masters' problem is that it's no longer a given that black people will vote for the Democrats. And Rowley's not telling us what we're going to get if we do. It's just a bunch of Republicans ain't gonna do nothing. They ain't gonna do nothing. They ain't gonna do nothing. Okay, what are Democrats gonna do? Republicans ain't gonna do nothing. I asked about the Democrats. See the GOP folks, the white right folks, they go to the polls and they ain't gonna give you nothing. You ain't gonna get nothing. What about the Democrats? See the Republicans ain't gonna do nothing. He already knows the Democrats aren't promising anything, so he's trying to talk around that. And as for reparations,
I get folks out there saying, well, we haven't gotten this and gotten that. Let me be real clear. There's not a damn thing you want that the right is going to give you. Not one of them. Not one of them.
that's right.
Not one. All y'all folk who get reparations, there is not a single Republican who supports reparations. Not one. So I can guarantee you they're going to make sure that never happens. Okay? Let's just be real clear. You ain't even going to get a study. They have 217 co-sponsors for H.R. 40. Not one of them a Republican. Hello, they win the House, you can hang that up.
Every Democrat from Kamala Harris to Elizabeth Warren to Bernie Sanders to nigga Jim Clyburn have all said they don't support reparations. But of course, Roly-Poly doesn't actually talk about that. He just says Republicans aren't in favor of it. And I'm supposed to believe that Democrats are? He didn't say that they are. See, this is weasel words. This is lying by omission. Where's the support in Congress at for reparations among the Democrats? Congressional Republicans say they won't support reparations, and congressional Democrats say that they don't support it either. What have the Democrats in the House or the Senate done in the last 2 years to do anything on reparations? What the heck have they done? Where's all these moves they've made? I've seen an anti-Asian hate crime bill. I've seen Democrats proposing that there be a federal law legalizing abortion in all 50 states. So what have they said about reparations? Not a doggone thing. So if Republicans do get back control of the House and the Senate, nothing's going to change when it comes to reparations. Democrats aren't saying anything on it. Republicans aren't saying anything on it either. Why is Rowley acting as if Democrats want to give us what we're owed, even when they have said they don't want to? But that's why Rowley didn't present you with the receipts of congressional Democrats saying, here's the check we're going to cut for black folks. He ain't talking about that. This is weasel words coming from a snake in the grass. Besides, in the black media, we've reminded you repeatedly that Biden made 2 major promises to black people during the 2020 presidential campaign. A so-called police accountability commission at the presidential level, and Biden and Kamala's much ballyhooed lift every voice plan. Their supposed economic plan. Whatever became of those promises, Rowley? It's been 2 years now. So where are they? Where are these promises at? Well, we already know. Biden dropped that police accountability commission idea almost before he took the oath of office. He said, well, Congress should do that because he doesn't have enough time or whatever. So that promise was utterly broken. He gave that one statement saying, police accountability commission, I ain't got time for it. Let Congress handle it. And that's the last anyone has heard of it. So what have those congressional Democrats done in regards to a police accountability commission? While we're talking about control of the House and the Senate, what have congressional Democrats done? Nothing. And as for Biden's lift every voice plan, he hasn't even said one word about it. Forget about saying that he's not going to do it. He hasn't even talked about it since the election. He's just pretended like he never promised it, and the white media, including its bootlick suck-ups like Rowley, don't mention it. So where is this big difference with the GOP, Rolly? Where's this track record of Democrats doing great things for black people for the last few years? It makes you look like an even bigger fool than the one we knew you were when you say that Republicans won't give black people anything and then you can't point to what Democrats are going to do. But this is what happens when your core audience are old Negroes, HBCU clowns, and fellow bootlicks. Rolly figures because none of them have critical thinking skills or even common sense, then the rest of us don't either. And he's wrong.
Okay, let's just be real clear. You ain't even gonna get a study. They have 217 co-sponsors for HR 40. Not one of them a Republican. Hello, they win the House, you can hang that up.
HR 40 was the daydream delusion of those two clowns, square-jaw and mushmouth. TBA personally eviscerated that one years ago, and it's been dead ever since. At this point, even the A-Dunce crowd doesn't mention it. They haven't talked about it since forever, so why is Roly Poly bringing that one up? Something that nobody's been talking about in the longest time. It's because when you're a wannabe member of the white media, you're always the last to know. Roly Poly doesn't have the ear of the black street, so he doesn't know or care what's going on with us. He's so busy sending out his resume to CNN and MSNBC and the White House, desperately hoping to get a weekend show on MSNBC or CNN, or hopefully they'll make him a permanent panelist on someone's show, or maybe the White House will finally return one of his phone calls or emails and make him a deputy assistant communications something or other. He doesn't actually know what's going on with the grassroots, and he doesn't care. He's too busy auditioning to be the head Negro in charge, or in his case, head bootlick in charge. He's out to prove that he can corral all the little Negroes out there, and that's why the DNC needs to spend their advertising budgets with him.
And I'm telling you right now, Pennsylvania, y'all better make sure Fetterman wins. North Carolina, black folks, y'all should be lining up for Sherry Beasley.
Now you notice he isn't asking black people to vote. He's not giving black people a reason to vote. He's demanding, he's ordering us to the polls. Pennsylvania, y'all better vote for Fetterman. What's Fetterman offering? Don't matter, vote for him. Cheryl Beasley, y'all, the black folks, y'all better turn out for Cheryl Beasley. They're not asking for our vote, they're telling us to, like slaves on a plantation. Again, do you see them ever talk to any other constituency like that? Do they tell the Jewish vote, y'all, in Florida and New York, y'all better get y'all bus to the polls, y'all better vote for so-and-so. Y'all better vote for Val Demings in Florida, y'all better vote. They don't talk like that to Hispanics. They don't order everybody else around. They come to us and they're wagging their finger at us and barking out orders at us. I mean, the sheer gall of this fool. Every time he takes those hot wings out of his mouth long enough to spew some gibberish, he's always talking about how the DNC needs to spend money with him. Well, black-owned media means absolutely nothing if it serves a white master, which is what Rolly does. He wants to make himself of maximum benefit to the white power structure that he wants money from. He's gotten money from the government before, and here he is, still got his hand out.
He was finished?
No, I don't know what happened. Hold on.
They messed with him?
They fucking with him.
Does anyone seriously believe that a chump like this, who literally buck danced with Hillary Clinton, would ever challenge her on her super predators remarks, or her hard-working white family's remarks, or her husband's policies, which she did nothing to reverse or even denounce when she was in the Senate? Of course not. Rolly's auditioning for a job, auditioning for some money, and he knows that he better not talk sideways to Massa if he wants even a snowball's chance in hell of getting something. And his begging is so pitiful.
And y'all can holler, oh, you've been the Democratic shield.
He can't call that Vanity Project podcast of his independent journalism. It's not independent anything. Independence means you can speak your mind no matter who doesn't like it. And when you're hoping that the Democrats are going to give you some money, there's no way in hell that you're going to call them out on their refusal to do anything for black people. You're going to always be deciding, well, I'll say a couple of small, minor critiques, but nothing too hard-hitting. And I'm definitely not going to be going straight at the jugular on this one because I don't want black folks thinking that they're supposed to be actually pushing back. I'm going to go ahead and protect them. I know which side my bread's buttered on. What kind of independence is that? Who is this chump that he's fooling? HR 40 indeed. It's so pathetic. You know, Rolly, if you're going to attack the grassroots, at the very least, keep up with the conversation. But of course he can't. because the discourse of the new black media flies right over his empty little head. Roly-poly is literally years behind the times. All these bootlegs know how to do is to attend the next NAACP spring breakfast, the National Action Network summer luncheon, or the Urban League fall fish fry, where they sit around with the rest of the irrelevant do-nothings and talk about who was a guest on this or that white cable station, who had an interview with this or that Democrat on their podcast. These chumps are a wannabe social club, and they failed to even become a prestigious one. When we say black media, this is why we make sure to tell you. We ain't talking about chumps like him. This is why we keep on his case. We're not talking about Rolly or any of these other safe, unthreatening Negroes who you see on white cable networks. The entire point of having a media is to advance a value system, to promote a particular worldview. Nobody's promoting the black grassroots values or worldview except for the new voices of black media. You need people speaking in your interest, not some half-brained get-out-the-vote effort for the Democrats. You're wasting your time if you think all you have to say is Republicans are bad and that's it. You have to give us a viable alternative. And it's not as if Democrats are new. They're quite old. They are a known quantity to us. They've had generations now to prove that they'll do what we need, and they haven't done it. When we make demands, they use trick language and weasel words to talk around us, and then pretend that they addressed our concerns when in reality, they addressed nothing. And when we corner them on reparations, they flat out say no. So Rolly's not fooling anyone by pretending that Democrats are going to do anything for us. Black people are getting killed with impunity. Nobody's talking about a black hate crimes bill. Meanwhile, all it took was COVID-19, and the government passed an Asian hate crimes law. That LGBT nightclub in Orlando was shot up, and Democrats decided to do a sit-in on the floor of the House of Representatives. Meanwhile, a white supremacist commits a massacre inside a black church, killing 9 people, including the pastor. And Democrats didn't do a sit-in, they didn't even stand up. Instead, they sent their bootleg buffoon Obama to sing a few bars of Al Green.
Okay, I know what I was looking.
You better learn to recognize when people don't respect you.
Let me be real clear. These white folks are holding on to this thing as long as they can. You are seeing the enthusiasm on their side. I keep warning folks, so y'all sit here and play around with this election and don't show up. I'm telling you, white, maggot Republicans, I said that for a reason. Those MAGA folks, they will be voting. Early voting on election day.
Rolly, your whining about how the MAGA crowd is lining up to support their candidates only makes you sound more stupid. Of course, the white right are lining up to support the racists in the GOP, because those guys have already done things for their constituents, and they've promised to do even more for them, and to make sure that their position is not threatened. Democrats have refused to make us any promises other than what they're not going to do. They put out memos saying that if black people come asking for something, you make sure to sympathize, but you don't dare make any promises. That was written down. We got that in black and white. When Democrats are forced to make promises like what happened in 2020, they then turn right around and break those promises. And then Roly-Poly has the nerve to act like he can't understand why the white right is motivated to go to the polls, while black voters are saying there's no point. And no, Rolly, that's not Republican propaganda, and it's not voter apathy either. That's pattern recognition. So nobody cares when you sit here blustering and blubbering and yeah, y'all ain't gonna vote, y'all crazy as hell. No, stupid crazy is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Right.
You know, like voting for a particular party come hell or high water over and over again, no matter how many times they lie to you, no matter how many times they make promises and then turn right around and break them, or don't make any promises at all. That's crazy to vote for them time and time again. That's insanity. That's crazy as hell.
Y'all, it's 2 damn choices.
I'm telling y'all, there's 2 damn choices. No, Rolly, there's not. You cannot call it a choice if your only option is candidate A, who says they're not going to do anything for you, or candidate B, who says, hell no, I won't do anything for you. Rolly wants us to think that the Democrats are different or better because the Republicans are more rude when they tell us what they're not going to do. That's a distinction without a difference, but the one thing it is not is a choice. How is Tommy Tuberville saying they want to give reparations to the criminals more disrespectful than Kamala Harris saying, I'm not going to do something that's only going to benefit black people? No. Elections are transactional. When it comes to my vote, it's a yes or no proposition. I tell you what I require, and I'm looking for a straight up yes. Anything other than a yes is a no. And all we've gotten for the Democrats are no's. Some bootlicks, however, think they're slick. They're really not. They think if they lay low, then they'll never be found out. They can hide amongst us forever, undermining us from within, and they'll be able to get away with being quiet or with pretending to give lip service to Black empowerment. That's why reparations is such an awesome issue to rally around. It genuinely threatens the status quo. Bootlicks can't afford to just sit back or be quiet on that one. Reparations threatens the stability of their white benefactors. So the bootlicks are forced to have to stand up and say something to protect their would-be white paymasters. They'll cuss and holler like Rolly. They will sit there and use shaming language and be condescending, and they'll show you exactly what they really think of you. But that's what the bootlicks do. When they see us aiming the big guns at white power, they have no choice but to say something or try to do something, as we saw in the case of Reggie Jones Sawyer out in California. We have to stop being timid about forcing people to declare where they stand. That's how you get things done. And it has to be something that requires white power to give up its power. It has to bring about a change in the status quo. And any hesitation, any reticence, any pushback counts as opposition. So don't come to me talking about vote Democrat. Joe Biden was the author of the '94 crime bill, and to this day, he refuses to admit to the damage that he did. See, that's the dirty little secret that roly-poly's not going to mention when he goes on these BS-laden rants. Democrats have been just as instrumental in passing laws to harm Black people as Republicans. Both political parties are proud of the harm that they've done to the Black community. The only difference is the Republicans brag about it. With the Democrats, Black people are out of sight, out of mind. I know you've seen the political flyers and cards in your mail, just like I have. And what I've seen of the Democratic strategy is clearly to appeal to Black women. That's what they're hoping that they're appealing to, because that's what all their literature is about. I get flyer after flyer, just like you do, talking about how important they say the votes of Black women are. And then when they list what they think is important to Black women, all I see is abortion. That's it. Abortion, something that matters primarily to white women. Black women are the largest group of women who die during childbirth. This in the United States. The maternal mortality rate for Black women in the U.S. surpasses all other groups, but you wouldn't know it by what these Democratic politicians say. Apparently, it's not a problem at all for them, and you wouldn't know it by what roly-poly says either. When's the last time you've heard him mention the maternal mortality rate for Black women or say that's a prominent issue? When has he questioned Democrats on it? When has he brought it up during one of these talk shows that he occasionally, once every blue moon, manages to squeeze into? Have you heard him make a big deal of the infant mortality rate among Black babies? Of course not. Black mothers' greatest reproductive threat comes from racist doctors and nurses in these hospitals. A Black woman's life is at risk merely because she became pregnant in a society that wants her and her baby dead. And what are Democrats doing to punish hospitals who are carrying out this medical apartheid? Roly-poly's a sock puppet, mindlessly parroting what his white Democratic masters tell him to say. That's why he didn't seem interested or even attempt to say what Democrats had done for Black people or what they're promising to do in the future. So, Roly, when you get through stuffing your face with the Western sizzle and do yourself a solid one, go beg your buddy Biden to explain what happened to all those fake promises he made to Black people in 2020. Ask your Democratic buddies to tell you what laws they passed on the behalf of Black people. Hell, even to list what bills they brought to the floor of the House for a vote or even a debate that would help protect the lives of Black mothers and their unborn babies in these hospitals, to say nothing of reparations or punishing the thugs in blue. What have they done? Why don't you ask them, Roly? And after you finally get around to asking your would-be Democratic paymasters about all the things they haven't done, you can then look in the mirror and ask yourself what Black person would listen to an obvious shill like you. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Montrez Braxton, Eve, Samora Morris, Rebellious Zoe, and Kevin Bryant. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.
Got another one.
Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth. I've got a story to tell you. It's not a happy one, but it's also not one you've heard much about, especially if you're a millennial or a post-millennial, Zoomer, whatever. As a lot of you may know, Jerry Lee Lewis died recently. Now, for those of you who don't know who he was one of the white guys who swung on the coattails of black music in the post-World War II period. He died recently, but the only reason anyone even knows that he existed was because he recorded the song Great Balls of Fire in 1957. That turned out to be a really significant year for him. Now, Jerry Lee Lewis was from Louisiana, the birthplace of jazz and rock and roll. As a child, he would eavesdrop on religious services of black churches, and that's how he picked up black music. He was the Justin Timberlake of his day, an overrated hack with no real talent, whose corny imitation of black music was only good enough to fool white music producers and audiences who didn't know any better. And you got the white media calling this clown a rock and roll pioneer. That's what they're calling him. A rock and roll pioneer. Man, black folks had already established that genre of music and had already developed it. It was already mature before this idiot came along doing his own bastardized imitation of it. But this is the white media for you. Black people create something, and if there happens to be a white guy who's 2 miles away who had a phone call being told that there was something going on, the white media will say that he was at the very beginning of it. He was at the center of it. Pioneer my behind. To call him a pioneer of rock and roll would be like saying Christopher Columbus discovered America. There was nobody here before he showed up. See, this is how the white media gives everybody else claim to things that we created. They just sit there and say this mess and see if they get any pushback on it or not. This is how they shoehorn everybody else into the things that we did, and then before it's all over, they start claiming that black people had absolutely nothing to do with it. But I say all of that to make the point that Elvis Presley wasn't the only culture vulture running around back then. Anyway, Jerry Lee Lewis got into music in the 50s because he was a white guy who played black music and the white media found him acceptable to them. But the only thing worse than his desecrating black music is that he married his own 13-year-old cousin, Myra Gale Brown, in 1957, which was the same year he recorded Great Balls of Fire. Maybe that inspired him. For the Gen Xers and the boomers who listen to me, you guys already know all this about Jerry Lee Lewis, but for the millennials and the post-millennials, this is probably a new story. This is probably new information. So for those folks, yes, there was a so-called rock and roll musician running around in the 1950s, and he married his own cousin, who was a child. Well, he was from Louisiana, where the incest and depravity is rampant, so we can be disgusted, though not surprised. But this 22-year-old man married a 13-year-old girl who was also his cousin. And the very next year, he got her pregnant at the age of 14. Yuck. And you know full well that if he married that girl at age 13, he was courting her well before that. So this creep was messing with a 12-year-old child at least. And second thing I want to know is who the hell married them? Who conducted the ceremony? How is it even legal, even in a reprobate swamp like Louisiana, to marry a 13-year-old child? Genetic immunity from law, I guess. Before I go any further, I think this is a good time to mention that this girl, Myra Brown, was Jerry Lee Lewis's third wife at the time.
Damn.
I'm not kidding about that. She wasn't his first wife or even his second. She was his third marriage. He married his first wife when he was only 16 years old. So God only knows what the hell's going on down there. Lewis would eventually go on to be married a total of 7 times. So his 13-year-old child bride was only number 3 of 7. This is who the white media is putting on a pedestal for you. Anyway, in 1958, Lewis went on tour in Britain, and he took his child bride with him. A British reporter asked the girl who she was, and she said that she was his wife. And that's when Jerry Lee Lewis was found out. Don't tell the racist and the white right, but after that little indiscretion of his came to light, Jerry Lee Lewis got canceled. Record stations stopped playing his records, which was a good thing for the music world. The invitations to perform concerts dried up fast, and his record label dropped him. Frankly, he didn't deserve to be canceled. He deserved to be in prison. What he did was a crime against man and nature, or it would have been if white privilege didn't exist. And, as is always the case, Lewis's fall from grace was short-lived. He was allowed to reinvent himself, and by the late 60s, he was back to touring again, making good money as a country music singer. According to his child bride, who was no longer a minor at this point, Lewis was heavy into drug use and became very abusive. Their marriage ended in 1970. By the way, on a side note, Jerry Lee Lewis was also cousin to disgraced televangelist Jimmy Swaggart. For those of you unfamiliar with this cousin, Jimmy Swaggart ran a preacher man hustle back in the 1980s, and his gimmick was that he would cry profusely at the end of each one of his sermons because apparently he was so convicted with the Holy Ghost or whatever. He would famously go on to get caught with a hooker, which led to one of the first and most shocking, entertaining bits of televangelist to fall from grace ever. He shed so many tears when he gave his little confession on television, you would have thought that he'd die from dehydration. And then, just to show how remorseful he was, a few years later, he got caught with another hooker. So I guess for Jerry Lee Lewis, degeneracy runs in the family. Now, Jerry Lee Lewis's own fall from grace was far worse than Jimmy Swaggart's, at least the reasons for it were. But, of course, he's got genetic immunity from law and white privilege, so the stench wasn't allowed to linger on him for too long. Lewis was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986. Now, the Hall of Fame had only been around for 3 years at that point, so they wanted to honor him as quickly as possible. He was allowed to have a bunch of Grammys and other music awards, so his pedophilia was effectively swept under the rug. Ironically, though, it was only this year that he was finally inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. By the way, that movie they made about him, starring Dennis Quaid, was made after he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And that movie sanitized his pedophilia, so this was a full-on rehabilitation of his image going on. Now, you know where I'm going to go with this next. The white media absolutely crucified Michael Jackson over what were proven to be lies. And yet here you had a bona fide pedophile, a real one, who bragged to the world that he was committing rape and incest and married his own doggone cousin who was a minor. And the white media made a movie about it, and the white powers that be put him in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And please don't try to say that he was only able to rehabilitate himself because it was the 1960s when he made his comeback and there was no internet back then. The reason he was able to rehabilitate himself is because white power understands that it cannot allow those who it considers their icons to be tarnished. Not permanently anyway. They have to make sure that there's some sort of redemption for them. Now, black people, on the other hand, they can demonize nonstop. I mean, for God's sake, if Jerry Lee Lewis is being lionized after he was a junkie who beat the hell out of his child bride, why is it then that people are allowed to demonize, say, Ike Turner? But it doesn't matter for the white media. The point is, Ike Turner's a black man, just like Michael Jackson. It's not important whether or not the accusations be true. What's important is that they be said and repeated nonstop until they catch on to the public mind and they become part of the popular consciousness. You want to make sure there's the names of black men that are associated with all sorts of acts of depravity and violence and what have you. And the white media is not the only ones whose consciences, such as they are, went on vacation. You have musicians shamelessly paying tribute to this incestuous pedophile who violated a child and forced her to have his baby and then became a junkie who abused her. Bob Dylan is paying tribute to that. And he's not the only one. Dennis Quaid, Elton John, and others are paying tribute to the pedophile pioneer. And you don't see anyone calling them to account for the fact that they're praising this guy and honoring him. Nobody running up in their faces and saying, "Do you denounce him?" No stories in the white media gathering all of his ex-wives together. Well, at least one of them's already deceased. But gathering his ex-wives together, as many as they can find, and having them swapping tales about what a horrible guy he was. No, they're not doing that. Yes, sounds about right. So when you see trash like Louis C.K. and Mel Gibson, who violently attacked his ex-wife and made racist and anti-Semitic remarks on numerous occasions, I mention that because the white media seems to have forgotten. When you see these guys being brought back into the media limelight after a brief hiatus and their careers continuing as if they had done nothing at all, well, that practice isn't new. It's quite old. It's part of white privilege, as is defaming black men who didn't do things like that. Well, for my part, I'll tell you this. If I never have to hear Jerry Lee Lewis's name mentioned ever again, that would be music to my ears. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Tamara Williams, Deep I 904, Anthony Pollard, Josiah Starr, and Bobby Williams. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.